Good morning. A few weeks ago, I gave a lesson about God's omnipotence, omnipresence, his omni-righteousness is the word that we came up with. He is all good. And we saw that he was all-knowing, all-powerful, and always present. Today we're going to continue to learn more about God and how that affects us today. He is not only these theological concepts we talked about a few weeks ago, he is also King of Kings. He is also Lord of Lords. Jesus is called the Prince of Peace. And from the very beginning of the Bible, we are told that we are made in the image of God. Genesis 1:27. We are made in the image of God. James, just now talking to us about the Lord's Supper, gave us some very important information, things that are going to pertain to this lesson this morning as well, about the value of human life. How valuable is your life? It's an important question. It's a question that every human asks themselves at some point. What am I worth? What are you worth? Can you put a dollar amount to yourself? God says you're worth dying for. That you are worth Jesus on the cross. Jesus died on the cross not to make us valuable, but because we are valuable. We didn't make a deal with God. He chose to pay the price for us. You hold the record for the highest price paid for. I don't know if you've ever watched Antique Roadshow, or I forget the one where they clear out storage bins at places and they try to find stuff of value, and you try to win this competition to see who has this most valuable item. Well, you hold the record out of all of history as the most expensive thing paid for. Because nothing else can compare to the price paid of Christ on the cross. You are made in the image of God, and that has made you priceless. So this lesson this morning is titled A World of Kings. And the question we're going to ask this morning, this lesson, is who are we and what are we to do? And to answer this first question of who are we is that you are made in the image of God. That is your identity. That is where we gain and understand our value as human beings. We are made in the image of God. And your understanding of who you are directly affects your value of self. And understanding that you are royalty directly affects that your value of self, that you are made in the image of the King of Kings. That is your Father. Your Father is the King of Kings. And that should affect the way we look at ourselves, the way we look at each other. It's always resonated with me. It's always stood out to me. Julius Caesar in 75 BC is captured by pirates. And they kidnap him. And they are then negotiating a ransom to give him back. And the pirates are asking for 20 talents of currency, of gold or silver, a huge sum, 20 talents for the ransom for Julius Caesar. And Julius Caesar is with them. He's been taken captive. He's listening to the pirates prepare to negotiate the demands for Julius Caesar. And Julius Caesar hears the number and he laughs. He says, "You should ask for more. You'll be able to get more. I'm worth more than that." And he encourages them to ask for more and demand more, and they take his advice. And I find that interesting when you realize who you are and what you're worth, that he could have the confidence to be able to say that. When we were in South Africa, we traveled to different parts of the region, and for the most part, I lived in Port Elizabeth, which is about 2 million people, but many times we'd go out into more rural areas, And we went to this village of about 200 people, less even than what people here in this room. And in this village, there was a chief. And the chief had a son, and I got to know him and spend some time with him. And the chief's son acted differently than everybody else. He knew that his actions had an effect on the community, and that his reputation wasn't just bound up to just himself, but what he did reflected on his father, and his actions would either help the community be more effective in their connection, and that he understood that his life wasn't just about himself, that he was connected to something bigger. But the way he carried himself, not with pompous contempt or segregation from others, that he's more elite, but that he knew that he had a service, he had a responsibility, that he had a purpose, and that he also had a value as being son of the chief, just even though a chief of 200 people. But understanding his connection, his identity, his value changed the way he carried himself. So we're going to change gears just slightly. We're made in the image of God. I want to ask, well, what is our image of God? What about us is made in God's image? Is it our free will? Is it our ability to love? Because those two go hand in hand. Love is not forced. Love is not just purely instinct. It is a choice. Well, what about us loves? What do we love with? We love with our heart. We love with our mind. We love with our soul. And we love with our strength. We're commanded to love with these things. And God has these things, a heart, a mind, a soul, and strength. And it's with these things that God has given us the ability to choose. Love is a choice. He's given us the ability to choose. What do we do with these? With our heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the human heart is very capable of great acts of compassion. It's also capable of great acts of evil. The human mind is very capable of conceiving thoughts that can aid the entire planet. It is also capable of genocide and capable of malevolent and nefarious concepts. The human soul, what is uniquely you, can be very pure through Christ, and it can also be very corrupted through evil. And our strength can aid and build, or it can harm and break and steal. God has given us the ability to choose, and He has created the choices, though, that are in front of us. Or He has given us choices, but He's given us the ability to choose. One of the most famous poems in the last 150 years is the poem Invictus by William Henley. Perhaps you've heard it before. Invictus is Latin for unconquered. I'm going to read to you just the last portion of this poem. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Have you heard that before? It's a very famous, very popular poem. And it's also, there's some threads of truth to it, and there's also some arrogance to it. This poem has been cited and quoted by people doing noble things and evil things. Timothy McVeigh, the man responsible for the Oklahoma bombing and killing 168 people, requested this as his last rites, his last words before he was executed. In contrast, Nelson Mandela considers this his favorite poem, a man who sought to bring peace and freedom and prosperity to South Africa. So the ability to choose is not inherently good and noble. It's what we do with those choices is what is the significance. You and I, made in the image of God, have the ability to choose, and God has provided the choices available to us, or some of the choices available to us, the good choices. Jesus teaches us what those choices are, and it's Luke 14 that we're going to be looking at this morning primarily, as William read for us just a moment ago, specifically in verse 31 is where we're going to be beginning. Before this, Jesus talks about the requirements of being a disciple, and he continues that, talking about the priority of God even over family. He talks about building and how we have to count the cost of construction, and are we willing to pay the price to build, to be built? And then he talks about these two kings, and this is what we want to focus on this morning, where Jesus says, what king going out to encounter another king in war will not sit down first and deliberate whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? And if not, while the other is yet a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So therefore, anyone who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. So in this context, in Jesus' teaching here, you are the king with 10,000. He says, you are this king of 10,000. And Christ is the king with 20,000. He is the mightier king. And this mightier king has come against you. He has come up against you. Now, if you're like me, the way my mind works with this, I think there's been historical battles of, those who are outnumbered and have overcome, and this is not some, Thermopylae with Spartans, 300 against 1,000,000 and overcoming them. This is, in this analogy, it's showing that these 10,000 stand no chance against the 20,000. It's 2-1. You do not stand a chance at overcoming this larger army, this mightier king. So what is to be done? Well, the king of the 10,000 needs to send a delegation and to make peace with the mightier king, with the one who is more powerful than themselves. And what, as the small king, as the small king, what are you willing to give up? What is the small king willing to let go of, to relinquish? What price is worth paying to this other king? What are the demands of this other king? What if the second king, the king with the 20,000, the mightier king, what if he demands from the lesser king, the smaller king, I demand your crown and your people? Is it worth paying the price? Can you relinquish this crown that's been given to you? You are a king. You can choose what to do with your heart, mind, soul, and strength. They're yours. You are free to choose what to do with it. Are you going to relinquish that? Are you going to surrender that to the one who's demanding it? Or do you wish to hang on to it? What happens, though, if you do surrender your crown and surrender your people? What happens? Will you become part of a different kingdom? You become part of a better kingdom, an infinitely better kingdom than just your own little pocket kingdom. Dorothy Day, about 60 years ago, rewrote the Invictus poem, and she called it Invictus Redeemed. I'm just going to read to you the last portion of her rendition of the poem. I have no fear, though strait the gate. He cleared from punishment the scroll. Christ is the master of my fate. Christ is the captain of my soul. And the beauty of this is that when you're surrendering your crown, you're surrendering your kingship, and you acknowledge him as the King of kings, that he is the authority, you're not part of his kingdom, you see that the condition in this kingdom, the quality of life, the type of life for you and for everyone that you are king of, which your heart, mind, soul, and strength, the condition is infinitely better in this new kingdom than the previous kingdom. It's way better over there. Jesus teaches in Matthew 11:11, talking about the coming of this kingdom. He says, truly I say to you, among those born of women, there has arisen no greater than John the Baptist. Yet the one who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. which is a profound teaching that of all humanity, the least in the kingdom of heaven, the least in the kingdom of the mightier king is greater than any. Just that one person is greater than any person, than Julius Caesar, than Alexander the Great, than Napoleon, than anybody of all history, or John the Baptist. This prophet of God, the least in the kingdom is mightier. It's better over there. It's infinitely better in the kingdom of this king. There's no better place. So what kind of a king is king of this kingdom? What makes this kingdom so great? I'm going to show you a video that I think does a pretty good job of describing this king.
Says, my king is the king of the Jews. He's a king of Israel. He's a king of righteousness. He's the king of the ages. He's the king of heaven. He's the king of glory. He's the king of kings. And he's the Lord of lords. That's my king. I wonder, do you know him? My king is a sovereign king. No means of measure can define his limitless love. He's enduringly strong. He's entirely sincere. He's eternally steadfast. He's immortally graceful. He's imperially powerful. He's impartially merciful. Do you know him? He's the greatest phenomenon that has ever crossed the horizon of this world. He's God's Son. He's a sinner's Savior. He's the centerpiece of civilization. He's unparalleled. He's unprecedented. He is the loftiest idea in literature. He's the highest personality in philosophy. He's the fundamental doctrine of true theology. He's the only one qualified to be an all-sufficient Savior. I wonder if you know him today. He supplies strength for the weak. He's available for the tempted and the tried. He sympathizes and he saves. He strengthens and sustains. He guards and he guides. He heals the sick. He cleanses the lepers. He forgives sinners. He discharges debtors. He delivers the captive. He defends the feeble. He blesses the young. He serves the unfortunate. He regards the aged. He rewards the diligent. And he purifies the meek. I wonder if you know him. He's the key to knowledge. He's the wellspring of wisdom. He's the doorway of deliverance. He's the pathway of peace. He's the roadway of righteousness. He's the highway of holiness. He's the gateway of glory. Do you know him? Well, his light is matchless. His goodness is limitless. His mercy is everlasting. His love never changes. His word is enough. His grace is sufficient. His reign is righteous. And his yoke is easy. And his burden is light. I wish I could describe him to you. He's indescribable. He's incomprehensible. He's invincible. He's irresistible. Well, you can't get him out of your mind. You can't get him off of your head. You can't outlive him, and you can't live without him. Well, the Pharisees couldn't stand him, but they found out they couldn't stop him. Pilate couldn't find any fault in him. Herod couldn't kill him. Death couldn't handle him, and the grave couldn't hold him. Yeah! That's my king. That's my king.
I had the words from that speech, and I was going to quote them, but I couldn't do it justice personally. That's my king, and that's the King of Kings. And in this kingdom, it's made up of kings, but there is one king of all, and it is Jesus. And as a Christian, you become part of the new kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, Christ's kingdom. And what a king we have. What a king we have. Now we've given up our crowns as the smaller kings. We recognize I am no longer king. I am made in the image of the king, but I am no longer king. I've given up my crown. And as Christians, we've all given up our crown as kings of our heart, mind, soul, and strength. But in the kingdom, we receive new crowns. And I want to talk about these new crowns that Christ gives us. In James 1:12, we're told, "Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him." And these are not crowns of kingship. These are crowns of specific attributes. The first is the crown of life. The second, in 1 Peter 5:4, in talking to elders in this context, he says, "When the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory." And in 2 Timothy 4:8, "Henceforth there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have loved his appearing." So you give up the crown of your kingship, of your heart, mind, soul, and strength. You give it over. And in return, you receive a crown of life, a crown of glory, a crown of righteousness. And for the longest time, I've heard it throughout the years and travels. I've heard songs sung of, "I want a mansion, robe, and a crown," and this obtaining these treasures of sorts. And it always seemed peculiar to me that these, for lack of better words, rewards that we were to earn, it didn't quite resonate well. Like, am I supposed to, is this like some retirement plan that I'm like laying up treasures in heaven and I get to cash in on them later? I'll give up this crown, but I know I'm going to get a better crown. And so this is more like an upgrade for me. Is that how I'm really approaching this? Is this how we are supposed to approach this? Well, I'm going to show you a passage that I think puts it perfectly in perspective. And before I do that, it's in Revelation. I want to give a little bit of context and understanding to the things that we're going to read together. We're going to read about these 24 elders in Revelation. And these 24 elders represent those who have been faithful to death. It's 12 and 12 combined to 24, representing the 12 from the Old Covenant of the children of Israel, the tribes, and the 12 apostles of the New Covenant, of the New Testament. And so the 12 and 12 combined, these 24, so these people that we're going to read about in Revelation represent those who were faithful unto death in either the Old Covenant or the New. And we see what they're doing before the throne in heaven. So Revelation chapter 4, verses 10 and 11. "The 24 elders fell down before him who is seated on the throne and worshipped him who lives forever and ever. And they cast their crowns before the throne, saying, 'Worthy are you, our Lord and God, to receive glory, honor, and power. For you created all things, and by your will they existed and were created.'" We are to lay up our treasures in heaven. We are to focus on our citizenship in heaven and being with God forever. And this helps me so much. For when we receive these crowns of glory, of righteousness, of life, but they're not just ours to keep forever. Glory, righteousness, and life, those aren't mine. I'm not entitled to glory, righteousness, and life. All those are completely owned by Christ. What glory is there outside of Christ? What life is there outside of Christ? What righteousness is there outside of Christ? They are all entirely his to give, and he gives those to his children. And then what do the children do with them? They take it off and they give it right back to him. He deserves all of it. He deserves all of it. And this scene of these elders of the Christians faithful unto life, taking their crowns off and casting them before the throne, is that such a powerful image, where I'm not looking forward to just my retirement plan and cashing in all my good works when I arrive in heaven. That's not it at all. That's not it at all. This part of this kingdom that we're a part of, this glory, righteousness, and life that Christ the King gives, we give it all back. We don't want to hang on to any of it because it all goes to him. He is deserving of all glory, honor, and power. They are all his always. And to continue to put things in perspective, I would like to read one last passage before we conclude. And that is, as humanity, we are kings of the 10,000. And Christ is the king of the 20,000. He is the mightier king. He is the mightiest king. And what a king he is. But the choice is either bow now or bow later. Romans 14:11 says, "For it is written, as I live, says the Lord, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue shall confess to God." On that day, there will be no unbent knees. There will be no one saying invictus, which means unconquerable. Every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. There will be no atheists on that day. There will be no atheists at judgment, because they will all confess who he is when they see him. The choice for all of us is, do we bow now or do we bow later? And this is not some tyrant who's just overpowering us all. This is a loving, almighty God. He is such a king, not just some warlord conqueror. So bow now or bow later. Those who have bowed before have a new kind of royalty. We're not just royalty by only being made in the image of God. We are a royalty by being royal priests, royal priesthood. We are also royal by being co-heirs with Christ. And we will be with him forever. So we live in a world of kings. And in conclusion, I want to ask the question of what kind of king are you going to be? Are you going to be a king who bows and surrenders and offers up your crown to the mighty king? Or will you say, I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul, and retain your heart, mind, and soul and strength for yourself, and not give it to the one who has all power, glory, and dominion, who all will bow before eventually? So what kind of king or queen are you going to be? God has given you the ability to choose, and he has provided with us choices, and what choices he has provided through his Son to be part of his kingdom with him as king, and where he can crown us with life, righteousness, and glory, and that we can give all that back to him and worship him and return to him all the great blessings he's poured out on us. If you are not part of the kingdom and would like to join it, we have a baptistry that's prepared that you can be baptized, where you can take the crown off. You can lay it at his feet, commit your life to Christ forever. And if you have any other needs that you would like to make known to the congregation, please either talk to somebody today before you leave, or come forward now while we stand and sing this next song.